Reading with your kids.
Hola, niha, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, bonimule wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful and historic neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, wherever you find your podcasts. Before we invite our guests into the studio, we want to invite you to connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram and TikTok, and at Jedley Magic on Twitter. We would also love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. We have an fantastic online magazine. It is called Reading with Your Kids. You're going to find some fantastic writing in the magazine, great author profiles, cooking with your kids, recipes, STEM activities you can do with your kids, find out what games you can play with your kids. So much there on the Reading with Your Kids online magazine, and it is free, and it is available at our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Join us right now from the great state of Washington. Our guest is returning to the Reading with Your Kids podcast to celebrate her brand new middle grade novel. It's called Extra Normal. Please welcome to the show the extra special Kate Alice Marshall. Hey, Kate, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Delighted to have you back on. Tell us all about Extra Normal, please.
Extra Normal is the story of Charlie Greer, whose parents are paranormal investigators and who has a number of adopted supernatural siblings. So she is the oldest, and she is the only one without any powers of her own. And her mother tells her that her superpower is maturity. So her parents are taking off on a much needed vacation that's already been canceled several times, and they're super stressed. So she is absolutely dedicated to making sure that they get to take this vacation and there are no problems and it doesn't get interrupted. And that is the same day that some very suspicious neighbors move in across the street. Ooh. And so Charlie has to figure out what's going on with the neighbors and solve the growing crisis in the neighborhood, all without letting her parents find out that anything is going wrong.
I love it. I love it. You know, that age, that middle grade age, this is perfect. There are so many kids, myself included, my daughter, that are just so intrigued with the idea of ghosts and spirits and all this other stuff that we can't quite explain.
I was always a huge fan of those kinds of stories growing up. And I was also a little bit of a scaredy cat. And so this book, I think I would have really loved. It's got a little bit of that spookiness and a few scares, but it's also very humorous, and it's playing around with the ideas a lot. So, for instance, she does have her little sister is a ghost, but she's a very sweet ghost who only accidentally lights things on fire when she gets scared.
I love that. You know, my daughter's so weird. When my daughter was in third grade, somehow she discovered one of those ghost hunter TV shows, you know, where every week they go into another building and you're sure they're going to catch the ghost that week, but they never do. And she found it, and she didn't want to watch it by herself, but she really wanted to watch it. No one would sit down and watch it with her. It was a holiday, and I was cooking. And I finally, you know, when I was finished, she said, "Please, will you come in?" And I sat down and watched it with her. And for the next 5 years, every week we would watch this show.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, and it really was fabulous. And it got kind of monotonous because they never found anything. But it was something that we were able to share. And it was something that made you think. I just loved it. And I think that this would have been a great book for both of us to read. I think we would have enjoyed reading this aloud to each other when she was in middle school.
I would like to think that she would have loved it.
Yeah. So what was it that inspired you to write this book?
Oh, I have been wanting to write this book for a while. It's sort of inspired by my love of the X-Files growing up. There's some very clear inspirations there. And also it's kind of crossed with The Conjuring, which obviously is a much more adult and scary thing. But I just loved the idea of a kid who has grown up in sort of the paranormal investigator environment. So this is all very normal for her, but also she doesn't feel quite part of it. And that sense of oldest kid responsibility is really dialed up a notch when what you are responsible for is the fact that your brother turns into a wolf on the full moon and you have to make sure he has chew toys and can't get out of the basement. And, you know, your little sister is a ghost and the neighbors can't find out and stuff like that. And all of that was just so fun to play with in the context of a family who, you know, they bicker and everything, but they really love each other. And so it created this really warm heart to the book that was just a joy to explore. And then it's full of the kinds of humor that I really love. Like, they have what is essentially a very grumpy cat, but it's a cursed doll. And so it's mom's pet from college. And all of the little bits. Her name is Miss Sinister, and I loved writing all of the little bits where this doll is basically like a cantankerous cat that causes problems.
I'm trying to picture you writing this, and I'm thinking that you, as you're writing, you would get this idea, and maybe you'd walked away from the keyboard and you just got this idea for a bit or for a spooky moment, and you just had to rush back and get it down on the computer on a piece of paper so you didn't lose it.
It was kind of like that, except that when I really started feeling like I was ready to write the book in terms of having all of those ideas and they kept arriving, I was extremely busy writing other books that were already due and under contract. And so it was actually kind of great because I couldn't write it yet. And so I just kept jotting down the ideas and thinking about it. And so when I was finally able to sit down and write it, I had figured out all of the hard stuff. And it was just like finally getting to write all of these things that I had been itching to for months and months.
I envy you. Because if I wasn't almost 100 years old, I probably would have been diagnosed with a lot of extra energy and given some kind of medication. But I get these ideas and I love them. And it's like, yeah, I want to work on them right now. And if there's anything that interrupts that flow and distracts me, it's like, yeah, I'll get back to that. And then I never get back to it. So that you're able to have these ideas and let the ideas kind of grow as you're also working on other projects that you love and feel passionate about. And then you're able to get back and get back to the story and complete it. The discipline I'm really envious of. I love that. And how can I find that? I have a few years left. How can I get that discipline?
Well, I'll tell you, I have about a dozen ideas and books that I think I'm going to write and that I think that I'm completely excited and devoted to, for every one that actually makes it. So there have been just a couple of books like this one where the idea was sticky enough to to last until I could actually sit down with it. A lot of times, my journey from having that first idea to sitting down with a draft is really quite short. But I find that when I do have those books that simmer for a long time, but I don't get bored or distracted or wander away from it, those ones are the ones that really stick with me as a writer, and the ones where the process of writing them has been the most joyful and engaging and quick, because I have spent so much time with them that even if I'm not an outliner most of the time, so I don't necessarily know exactly what each scene is going to hold. But by that time, I know what the book feels like so well that the decisions are easier to make.
Yeah. What is it about the middle grade age and also young adult age that you like writing for so much?
I write for 3 age categories now. I'm also writing adult, and each of them to me is completely different in a different, wonderful way. So middle grade is particularly close to my heart because I think it has the sort of starkest difference between the other two. And it's a really wonderful place to explore stories of kind of figuring out your own potential and your identity and where you fit in your family and things like that. It's really the first age at which you start to have to define yourself as an independent person and like, who am I? And start asking those kind of bigger questions of yourself and your place in the world, and connecting those themes to, fun adventures that have a lot of energy and they're very pacey is just always a really fun writing experience, and one that also allows me to tap into a level of just genuine emotion where you don't have as much of the layers of baggage and cynicism that you might have in an adult perspective in a book. And so a lot of the feelings are more raw and intense, and they're actually the books that are most likely to make me tear up when I'm writing them, even if the content isn't as dire as, my adult books. They're the ones that I feel the most in my heart. And so I think that I will always continue to return to that age category.
That's really neat. And, that whole idea of forming your own identity in those middle grade ages, that's kind of something that Charlie's doing in Extra Normal. Is she's, part of this family that she loves, but she realizes that she's not a werewolf and not a ghost that starts fires accidentally.
Yeah, and she feels a lot of responsibility as, the oldest, the grown-up one. She's 12 years old and she's got the weight of the world on her shoulders. And a lot of the book is about her figuring out both how she can take care of her family without having these special powers and without being supernatural, and where her strength and her value lies, but also having to kind of realize that she is a kid and it's not really her job to take care of her parents. And so I remember as a kid, when my parents were going through really stressful times, I carried a lot of that emotionally, and I was worried about them, and you can feel that stress in your household, and Charlie is going through that. And, it's hard as a family to figure out how to take care of each other and how to support your kids when the grown-ups are having a hard time. So there's a thread of that in the book as well.
You're certainly right. There are so many kids out there who feel a need or feel it's a responsibility to take care of their parents. And that's a lot of weight to carry around when you're 12.
And I think that as capable as Charlie is, there's also a moment in the book where they reaffirm that they're there to take care of her too.
You know, Charlie's parents are supernatural or paranormal investigators. Did you do any research in preparing for this book? Did you sit down and talk to any paranormal investigators?
Well, they are the sort of paranormal investigators of, they work for a secret government agency, and the mom she's a psychic, and the dad is, essentially, they don't actually work for the FBI, but he's more or less like the FBI agent character. And so, as far as research, it was more like, oh yay, I have an excuse to rewatch the X-Files.
One of the reasons I asked is during that season of my life when my daughter and I were watching those ghost hunter shows, I was at a get together and overheard somebody in the other room saying that they were a paranormal investigator, and had a conversation with them, and it was very unusual. Just say that. I didn't come away with any more belief that these things really existed. But hey, that's the question. What do you think? Where are you on that? Do you believe in ghosts and werewolves and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, I'm very much I'll say an enthusiastic skeptic. I do not, I think, have an ounce of true belief in me, but it's a subject that I really enjoy, and I find it really interesting to look at how, especially like across history, people have tried to do a scientific or pseudoscientific examination of the supernatural, and how people have tried to create something systematic that can look at the ineffable, the things that are by their definition probably not able to be measured and cataloged.
Yeah. I'm listening to a book right now that talks about the witch trials and all the quote unquote scientific methods that were used to divine whether or not somebody was a witch. And I'm really glad I didn't live back then, because it wasn't really scientific.
I think that I think Mary Roach is her name. She writes a lot of nonfiction books on very specific subjects that are very quippy and fun. And one of them is, I think it's called, I can't remember now, but she has one about studying the afterlife. And so it goes through things like the attempts to measure the weight of a soul and things like that. And I really enjoyed that book, and I enjoy that kind of subject. And then I've done, for other projects, I've done a fair amount of watching like the ghost hunting shows and reading about the real life Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are the subjects of the Conjuring movies, and things like that. So, it's a subject I've definitely delved into plenty, but definitely from a sort of outsider's perspective who really is never going to be convinced.
I'm curious, is there any subject that you're looking to tackle either in a middle grade novel or YA or even an adult novel that you haven't been able to get to yet, but you really want to jump into it?
Oh gosh, many. It's kind of an ongoing joke that anytime I decide to do a deep dive on research for a book, I don't end up writing that book. So I have all of this research I've done on caving and cave diving and Antarctica, and survival in various regions of the world and things like that. I would really love someday to write a sort of The Thing style Antarctic horror isolation book in some age category. I can kind of imagine like the zippy, spooky fun version for kids as well as the extremely dark version for adults. So someday I will be able to do something with all of that research.
Well, that is terrifying to think of. The caving stuff, as much as I love exploring caves, I like to do it safe. The idea of like swimming through a water-filled cave to get to it, yeah.
Yeah. I'm extremely risk averse in real life, and I really like reading about other people taking huge risks.
Well, and that's one of the beauties of books is that we can take those risks, whether or not we were thinking of doing it or would never do it in a million years. It's a great way for kids and adults to kind of imagine how they would deal with some of the situations and deal with some of the problems that they'll encounter doing that kind of scary stuff and other moments in real life. So that's one of the reasons we love encouraging families to read with their kids.
We have been doing a bunch more reading with our kids now that our youngest, she's 4 now and getting up to the age where she can follow along with some of the same books that the 7-year-old enjoys. And it's been a lot of fun to follow their interests. They tend to latch on to something for a long time. And so we get to learn like, oh, we're going to learn so much about Pokemon this month.
Well, yes, I learned a whole lot about Pokemon, and thankfully I've forgotten most of it. But we don't want people to forget where they can go to find out more about you and find out more about Extra Normal. So where should they go looking for you?
The best place to find information on my books is my website, which is katemarshallbooks.com. I am also sort of on Instagram at kmarshallarts, and I have a newsletter you can sign up for updates when I remember to send it.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Extra Normal, the great new middle grade novel from our guest, Kate Alice Marshall. Kate, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We are so grateful that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. If you are on LinkedIn, please connect with Jed Doherty. We also have a Reading with Your Kids page on LinkedIn. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Authors, click on the Authors Click Here button to find out how you can be a guest here on the show and find out how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. And also, parents, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com to download our free online magazine. Hey, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our amazing guest. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.